The winter my youngest daughter was 3 years old, the temperature outside dropped to 11 degrees, and our propane ran out at 2 in the morning. My husband was away. I had 4 children in the house. The oldest was 9. The youngest was in a crib in the back bedroom. I remember standing in the kitchen in the dark, putting my hand against the wall and feeling the cold already starting to come through. Not the cold of a drafty window, the cold of a house that has lost its heat source and is beginning to equalize with the temperature outside. I did not panic. My grandmother had prepared me for exactly this moment without either of us knowing it. I walked to the mudroom. I pulled out 3 things she had shown me when I was a girl. Things she kept on a shelf like they were as normal as a broom or a bucket. Things that cost almost nothing, and that night kept my children warm until the sun came up and my husband could get home with more propane. That was 19 years ago. In those 19 years, I have not paid a heating bill above $40 in any single month. Not once. And we live in a climate where January temperatures regularly fall below 0. What I'm going to share with you today is the complete heating system my family has used for 3 generations. Not one trick, not one tip, a system. The way heat is actually managed in a home that does not depend on a gas company or an electric company to decide whether your family is warm tonight. This is how my grandmother kept a farmhouse with 12 rooms warm through Pennsylvania winters on a wood supply that would make most people laugh at its size. And this is how I have done the same thing in my own home for nearly 2 decades. Before I show you the methods, I need to explain something about heat itself that changes everything about how you approach keeping a home warm. Most people think about heating a home as a matter of producing heat. You turn on the furnace. The furnace makes heat. The heat fills the rooms. This is the model the gas company and the electric company and the heating oil company want you to operate from, because in that model, you are entirely dependent on them. You produce nothing. You manage nothing. You simply purchase heat from them and hope the price stays reasonable. My grandmother thought about it completely differently. She thought about heat as something to be captured, managed, and preserved rather than continuously produced. A home that holds heat requires very little heat input to stay warm. A home that loses heat as fast as it is produced requires enormous heat input continuously. The difference between these 2 situations is not the furnace. It is everything else. The walls, the windows, the doors, the floors, the way the rooms are arranged, and a dozen small practices that determine whether the heat you have stays in your home or bleeds out into the cold air outside. She used to say that a foolish man heats the outdoors all winter and pays for it. A wise one heats 4 walls and a ceiling and nothing more. Everything I'm about to show you starts from that principle. The first method and the foundation of everything else is what my grandmother called closing the house down. Most people heat their entire home all winter. Every room, every hallway, the basement, the spare bedroom that nobody sleeps in from October to April. They heat all of it because the furnace does not know the difference, and because the thermostat does not ask which rooms matter. My grandmother never heated a room she was not using. In the deep winter months from December through February, our farmhouse effectively became a smaller house. The rooms we lived in, the kitchen, the main sitting room, 2 bedrooms, and the bathroom were kept warm. Everything else was closed off with heavy curtains hung across the doorways, or doors shut tight with rolled towels pressed against the bottoms to stop the draft. Those unused rooms were allowed to drop to whatever temperature they reached. In severe cold, they sometimes got close to freezing. We did not care. Nobody was sleeping in them. Nobody was sitting in them. They were not living space in January, they were storage space. Closing them off meant that every bit of heat produced in the house was heating 4 or 5 rooms instead of 12. The same amount of wood lasted more than twice as long. This is the single most impactful thing most households can do, and it costs absolutely nothing. Go through your home today and identify every room that no one uses regularly between November and March. Close the vents if you have forced air, shut the doors, roll a towel against the gap at the bottom. You have just reduced the volume of space your heating system needs to maintain by potentially 30 or 40%. Your heating costs will reflect that reduction immediately. The second method is window management, and this one surprises people because it sounds too simple to matter as much as it does. Windows are the primary point of heat loss in most homes. A single pane window in winter is barely better than a hole in the wall from a thermal perspective. Even a double pane window loses significantly more heat per square foot than an insulated wall. But windows also gain heat during the day when the sun is shining, and this is something my grandmother used deliberately and systematically. Every morning in winter, she opened every curtain and every blind on the south and east, facing windows of the house before 8 in the morning. Every evening when the sun dropped below the tree line, she closed every curtain on every window in the house. Not some of them, all of them. Heavy curtains lined with flannel in the coldest months, drawn completely across every window. The difference this makes is measurable. A south-facing window on a clear winter day gains more heat than it loses over the full 24-hour period if that heat is captured by closing the curtains at night. An uncovered window at night loses heat continuously. My grandmother understood this at an intuitive level from a lifetime of practice, and the numbers support her completely. If your curtains are thin or decorative and not insulating, the simplest upgrade my grandmother ever made was to hang a second layer of heavy fabric behind the existing curtains on the coldest windows. Old wool blankets, flannel sheeting, even a folded quilt hung from a rod behind the curtain. These cost nothing if you use what you have. They make an immediate and noticeable difference in how warm the room feels overnight. She also used window film, not the plastic shrink film from the hardware store, though that works well enough. She used what she had, which was wax paper pressed lightly against window glass and held with small strips of cloth tape around the edges. The wax paper creates a dead air space between itself and the glass that significantly reduces heat loss through the pane. It sounds primitive. It works. I have used it myself in the coldest winters when I needed every possible advantage, and I have been consistently surprised by how much difference a thin layer of wax paper makes against a drafty old window. The third method is draft elimination, and this is where most homes lose heat invisibly and continuously without the people inside ever knowing it is happening. Cold air does not need a large opening to enter a home. It needs any opening. A gap under a door the width of a pencil allows enough cold air exchange over the course of a night to noticeably drop the temperature of a room. Most older homes have dozens of these gaps, around window frames, under exterior doors, around electrical outlets on exterior walls, which many people do not know are a significant source of cold air infiltration, around plumbing penetrations, around the gap where the chimney meets the ceiling if you have a fireplace. My grandmother's draft elimination practice was systematic and thorough. Every fall before the first cold spell, she went through the entire house with a single candle. She held it near every window frame, every door frame, every electrical outlet on an exterior wall, every gap she could find. Anywhere the flame moved toward the wall was a gap letting cold air in. She marked each one and addressed each one with whatever material was appropriate. Rope caulk in the window frames, which peels off easily in spring. Draft snakes, which are simply fabric tubes filled with sand or dried beans, pressed against the bottoms of exterior doors. Foam outlet gaskets behind the outlet covers on exterior walls, which cost pennies each and eliminate one of the most overlooked sources of heat loss in a home. She also showed me something about chimney dampers that most people with fireplaces do not know. A fireplace damper that is closed but not sealed still allows significant air exchange. When the fireplace is not in use in winter, the damper should be fully closed, and the opening should be blocked with an inflatable chimney balloon or a piece of rigid foam board cut to fit snugly in the opening. An open or poorly sealed chimney damper is like leaving a small window open all winter. My grandmother stuffed the unused fireplace opening with old blankets in the deepest winter months. She sealed it completely. She was not sentimental about the visual of a blocked fireplace. She was practical about the warmth of her kitchen. The fourth method is thermal mass, and this is the one that most people have never heard of, and that makes the biggest single difference in how a wood-heated home performs. Thermal mass is any dense, heavy material that absorbs heat slowly and releases it slowly. Stone, brick, concrete, dense ceramic, water in large containers. These materials act as a heat battery inside your home. When you fire a wood stove or a fireplace or any other heat source, the thermal mass in the room absorbs heat during the firing period and then continues to radiate that stored heat for hours after the fire has died down. A room with high thermal mass stays warm overnight from a single evening firing. A room with no thermal mass cools quickly the moment the heat source goes inactive. My grandmother's farmhouse was built with a massive central stone chimney that ran from the basement through 2 stories to the roof. Every fire in the kitchen stove and the main room fireplace heated that chimney stack. By evening, that chimney was radiating stored heat into every room it passed through. She did not need to keep the fire going overnight most nights because the chimney kept radiating heat until morning. The mass of the stone had absorbed enough energy during the day to last through the cold hours. Most modern homes have no thermal mass to speak of. Drywall and fiberglass insulation and wood framing store almost no heat. But you can add thermal mass to any room without construction. Large clay pots, the kind used for outdoor plants, stacked or grouped near your heat source. Large ceramic tiles on the floor near the stove. And most practically, large containers of water. Water has one of the highest heat capacities of any common material. A 5-gallon jug of water sitting near your wood stove or your most used heat source absorbs an enormous amount of heat during the day and radiates it slowly through the night. My grandmother kept a row of large glazed ceramic crocks along the wall nearest the kitchen stove. She said they were for storage. They were also, I understand now, thermal mass. They were keeping her kitchen warm. If you have a wood stove or a pellet stove or any radiant heat source, place as much thermal mass around it as you practically can. Dense ceramic, stone, or water containers positioned within 4 to 6 feet of the stove will absorb heat during firing and return it to the room for hours after the fire goes out. This single practice can reduce the amount of wood or fuel you burn by 30% or more while maintaining the same room temperature through the night. The fifth method is body heat management, and this one is almost never discussed because it sounds too basic. But it is not basic. It is fundamental, and my grandmother used it deliberately. A human body at rest generates approximately the same heat as a 75-watt light bulb. A physically active person generates significantly more. 6 people in a room generate the equivalent of 6 light bulbs of heat continuously. In a small, well-insulated, thermally massive room, the body heat of the people occupying it is a meaningful contribution to the room temperature. My grandmother kept the family in 1 or 2 rooms in the coldest months, not just because it was social, not just because it was practical, but because the body heat of everyone in the house was concentrating in those rooms and contributing meaningfully to the warmth. The rooms we did not use got no body heat. They got cold. The rooms we lived in stayed warmer than the fire alone would have kept them because we were in them. This sounds like common sense. It is. But how many households today heat 6 rooms so that each person in the family can have a private space to be cold in separately? The practice of gathering in a common warm room in winter is not a hardship. It is wisdom. It is what families did for centuries before the economics of cheap energy made it seem unnecessary. The 6th method is what my grandmother called the hot water system, and it is the thing I want to talk about most carefully because it is the method that saved my children on that 11-degree night when the propane ran out. Hot water stores a remarkable amount of heat and releases it slowly. My grandmother knew this, and she used it in 3 specific ways that I still use in my home today. The first use is the stone bottle. A heavy ceramic or stoneware bottle, the kind used traditionally for cider or vinegar, filled with boiling water and stoppered tightly, holds heat for 4 to 6 hours. My grandmother had 6 of these. Every evening before bed, she filled them with water that had been heating on the back of the kitchen stove all day and placed one at the foot of each bed. A stoneware bottle of hot water under the covers at the foot of a bed keeps that bed warm through the night without any other heat source. I have slept comfortably in an unheated bedroom in January with nothing but a stoneware bottle at my feet and a good wool blanket over me. The bottle was still warm when I woke in the morning. On the night the propane ran out, I did exactly this for my children. I heated every pot of water I had on the gas burner before the last of the propane ran out. I filled every stoneware and ceramic vessel in my kitchen. I wrapped each one in a towel and placed them in the children's beds. Then I pulled every wool blanket in the house and laid them on top of the existing bedding. My 3-year-old slept through the entire night without knowing anything was wrong. By morning, the house was cold, but the beds were not, and the children were fine. The second use of hot water is the warming stone, a flat field stone, the kind you can find anywhere outside, placed in a low oven or near a fire until it is thoroughly heated, then wrapped in heavy cloth and placed at the foot of a bed or on a chair, radiates warmth for 2 to 3 hours. My grandmother had a collection of these stones that she kept near the kitchen stove all winter. They were her portable heat. She used them for cold hands. She used them for cold feet. She used them to warm a chair before sitting down on a bitter morning. She used them to warm the foot of a sick child's bed. The stones cost her nothing. They required only the heat that was already being produced in the kitchen. They were the most versatile heat tool in her house. The third use is the vapor method. In very cold, dry conditions, a pot of water kept at a low simmer on any heat source adds humidity to the air. Humid air feels warmer than dry air at the same temperature because moisture conducts heat to the skin more efficiently than dry air does. In a dry, heated house in winter, you need a higher temperature to feel warm than you need in a properly humidified house. My grandmother kept a pot of water on the back of the stove all winter. Sometimes she added dried herbs to it, sometimes apple peels or cinnamon. The house smelled wonderful and it felt warmer than the thermometer said it should. This is not a trick of perception. It is physics. Humid air at 65 degrees feels warmer than dry air at 65 degrees. A simmer pot on your heat source costs you almost nothing and allows you to feel comfortable at a lower thermostat setting. The seventh method is insulation from below, and this is one my grandmother considered the most important of all, because she said cold comes up through the floor as surely as it comes through the walls, and most people never think about it. Cold floors pull heat from your body constantly when you stand or walk on them. A cold floor makes an entire room feel colder than it is because your feet and legs are in continuous contact with a surface that is absorbing heat from you. My grandmother covered every floor in the living areas of her house with braided rag rugs in winter, not for decoration, for insulation. The rugs created a layer of still air between the cold subfloor and the living space. Standing on a rug feels warmer than standing on bare wood or tile at the same temperature because the rug insulates your feet from the cold mass of the floor below. She also insisted that everyone in the house wear wool socks indoors during winter. This sounds like the advice of an old woman being fussy about cold feet. It is actually the advice of someone who understood that a significant portion of body heat is lost through contact with cold floors, and that this heat loss makes every other heating effort work harder. Wool socks on your feet indoors in winter is worth 2 degrees on your thermostat. I am not exaggerating. The eighth and final method in my grandmother's system is what she called the overnight protocol. The specific set of things she did every single evening before bed to ensure the house would be as warm as possible when the family woke the next morning with no heat having been added overnight. She checked every window and pulled every curtain fully closed. She pressed the draft snakes against every exterior door. She placed hot water stones in every bed. She banked the fire in the kitchen stove, which means she packed the firebox tightly with large, dense pieces of wood and closed the damper down to its lowest setting, allowing the wood to smolder and produce heat slowly through the night, rather than burning hot and fast and going out by midnight. She covered the kitchen stove with a heavy cast iron lid if she was not using the top surface. She closed the door between the kitchen and the rest of the house to keep the kitchen heat concentrated in that room overnight. And she filled the ceramic crocks near the stove with water from the afternoon's heating so they would radiate stored heat through the coldest hours. In the morning, the kitchen was warm. The rest of the house was cool but not cold. The fire needed only a few pieces of wood added to a bed of coals that had been maintained all night. Within 30 minutes, the kitchen was fully warm again, and the day's heat was underway. This overnight protocol requires maybe 20 minutes of preparation. It keeps a house significantly warmer through the coldest hours with no additional fuel consumption. It is pure management, pure practice. And it works without any equipment that costs money or requires electricity, or depends on any company or any system outside your own four walls. I want to tell you why this knowledge matters to me, beyond the practical benefit of warm children and low heating bills. There is something that happens to a person who understands how their home works, who knows how to keep their family warm without picking up the phone and hoping someone answers, who has the knowledge and the tools to be warm on an 11-degree night when the propane runs out and the children are asleep. That something is a kind of quiet confidence that most people in modern life have been systematically separated from. The confidence of competence, of knowing that you are not entirely at the mercy of systems outside your control. My grandmother had that confidence completely. She was never afraid of winter. She respected it the way you respect something powerful. But she was never afraid of it because she had the knowledge and the practice to meet it on her own terms. That is what she gave me when she showed me those things she kept on the shelf in the mudroom. She gave me the knowledge that made the difference between a frightening night and a manageable one. That is what my husband and I have worked to put into writing. The heating methods you learned today are part of it. The garden calendar that tells you what to plant and when, so your family has food from your own ground. The healing plant knowledge my grandmother used to keep her family healthy through the winter months. The echinacea protocol she used at the first sign of illness. The chamomile and the calendula and the garlic preparations that have been in my family's medicine chest for as long as anyone can remember. The food preservation methods that let you put enough food by in the fall to carry your family through to spring. The household chemistry that costs pennies and replaces products that cost hundreds of dollars a year. All of it written down, all of it documented, all of it tested on a working property by people who live this way every day. The link is in the description, or you can find everything on our channel. Winter is coming whether we prepare for it or not. The question is only which side of that fact you are standing on when it arrives. Try the overnight protocol this week. Pull every curtain before bed tonight. Roll a towel against every exterior door. Put a large container of water near your heat source tomorrow morning and leave it there all day. Tell me in the comments whether your house felt different the next morning. Tell me whether your heating system ran less. Tell me what you noticed. I read every comment and I answer as many as I can. Next time, I'm going to show you the specific type of wood my grandmother burned that produced 3 times the heat of regular firewood at the same volume, and that most people never think to use because nobody told them it was available. It grows on nearly every property in North America. It costs nothing to harvest. And once you know what to look for, you will never look at your woodpile the same way again. I will see you then.